Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Lion, the Way, and the War, where we discuss Jesus, His church, and the spiritual battle that surrounds us all. My name is Craig Allison, and I'll be your host. All right, so I am so eager to begin a conversation today with our guest. Brandon Eaves joins us today, and Brandon has worked a variety of roles. We're going to get caught up with him a little bit. I believe you were a firefighter, maybe? Do I have that correct? You own a photography business. You've been a youth minister. You're into the CrossFit stuff, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But I believe that you've got some valuable insights to share with us today. Regarding students and parents and church leaders with your work as a youth minister. So, Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I am excited. I think this is going to be a really productive talk.
I'm glad you're here today. And so I just want to basically get caught up with you a little bit and talk about some of your past experiences. You're kind of one of those jack of all trades, if you will. So the firefighter thing, are you actively a firefighter?
Not anymore. I think that was a time where I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. And, you know, when you're a young kid, especially a boy, and the big red fire engine comes by, sirens going, and the guys come out, it sticks with you. And I did that for several years as a volunteer fireman in Bradley County. But over time, it wasn't for me. It's a great occupation. I salute the people who do it. But for me personally, I felt my life was going in a different direction than that.
Sure. I did a brief stint. I went through the whole fireman training thing. And the first house fire we went to, those guys were, man, they're gung-ho about fire. And I came out, and my shield is like starting to melt. You know, my SCBA on the back, I can feel it burning through my back, and I'm trying to get out of it. I'm hollering and screaming. And they're laughing and spraying each other down with the hoses like they had just had the best time of their life. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I was in a building with flames rolling backwards over my head. That's not for me. So, yeah, it's not for everybody. So, but it's a great experience for me. All right. So I've looked at some of your photography. Is you own your business? How's that going for you?
It's good. I picked up a contract with the Chattanooga Motor Car Festival in a couple of weeks. Prior to that, I mainly did a lot of motorsports. I did some weddings and so forth, but it's not number one on my list of things to do right now, but it is a good side income that I make. And it's something that's very relaxing. It's something that is very time-consuming, but it's something that you can see a different dimension, and when you show it to certain people, they may be having a bad day, and to see something like that can provide them some sort of like an escape from the current moment. That way they can kind of recharge a little bit and then come back and tackle whatever giants are facing them in life.
Gotcha. So what keeps you busy now? What puts bread on the table, your main occupation?
I do healthcare,
okay.
Hospice mainly, here in Chattanooga. I've done that for just under like 4 years. I've done nursing for several other years, but hospice is something that I've just kind of settled into, and it's something that I kind of have a niche with in life. Aside from that, I do ministry. Okay. So I preach on Sundays, and then I handle the young adults at another congregation on Wednesdays.
Okay, where are you preaching at?
Star Mountain Church of Christ.
Okay, Star Mountain. I don't know where that's at.
It's so most people don't, and it's odd because STARR is the name, but it's on Star Mountain Road, which runs from Etowah to Tellico, Tennessee.
Okay,
and it's up on the hill. It looks like a log cabin, but I've been there for just a little under 3 years. I believe I started December of 2020.
Okay.
During COVID, which so many people look at it like as a very challenging time in our country. But if you look at it as in the sense that congregations, and several did gain new ministers during that time, it was actually a good time because it allowed congregations to be blessed by someone that they can work with and help with growth and help, everybody get to heaven and so forth.
Okay. And you just got back from Spain.
I did.
You were like judging some CrossFit tournament competition, something along those lines?
I did. I started out, I've been judging for several years CrossFit, but I got word of mouth that there was a need for online judges. When you go to the big world championships, you always submit like videos to be judged.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, and that lasted for about 3 weeks or so, and I got an invitation to go do it in person. And I originally wanted to go there for like 4 days, and that was it, because I was like, what does Spain have to offer besides ham and running from the bulls and soccer?
Right.
But the more I looked into it, that's the beauty of algorithms sometimes, is when you look at places to eat, they'll advertise all these different tours. And I'm a big history guy.
Okay.
And they have real castles over there. They have real aqueducts, like Roman aqueducts,
Right.
that still work. Different cathedrals. One I went in was several hundred feet tall and took almost 300 years to complete. And so organically, because of that, 4 days turned into 10 days. And I still didn't feel like it was long enough, but I knew it was time to come back home after 10 days. But 10 days is the perfect time for someone to go to a European country.
Yeah. And so we'll get into a little bit about, the whole transition into CrossFit and everything. But first I want to talk a little bit about something that's been hitting my desk a lot lately, and I don't know why, but it's a topic of conversation right now. Seems to be of a concern, and I get this probably every year at some point, but there seems to be a lot of concern around being single in college. Everybody wants to be in a relationship, know the person that they're going to marry. And it's just intensified this year. It's odd how many people I've actually been, girls and guys, been talking to in my office at the Christian Student Center, just really concerned about being single and kind of scared that that's going to be their course in life. And you're older and single, and I thought maybe you might have just some words of advice and wisdom there for what that looks like and why that's not such or necessarily a bad thing.
Not at all. 100%. And the awkward silence there sounded funny, but in reality, my young adults class at North Bradley, almost all of them are married now. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much turned into a marriage class now. Okay. But I have a few people who are single, and they do struggle with that sometimes. They don't come out and say it, but I can just tell. Yeah. Honestly, being single in 2023, with everything that's going on in this country, is not a bad thing. When you look at Paul, I mean, he is an excellent example of someone who's single, very educated, but he used his status, not completely, but partly to help influence people, showing them things like that. Yeah. I think personally, from my experience being single, I used to struggle with it. Mm-hmm. But being 36 years old and single, it's not a bad thing. When you're single, you have more time to work on you. You have more time, particularly for college, to focus on doing the best you can in your classes. And being single, you have the most attention to focus on growing yourself in the Lord. Yeah. You have the most time to study. You have so much time to give and to do benevolence and whatever it is. Just show the love of Jesus Christ to other people. If you're with somebody, you can be with somebody, but would that person you're with help you get to heaven? Would that person you with help you grow? To the guys, I would ask, is that somebody you can see yourself being the head of a household after you're married? For the female, is it somebody that you have absolute confidence that you're with would help you to grow in the grace and knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ? Mm-hmm. If you're with somebody, you can be with somebody. So many people on earth in their 20s are with somebody. But the question is Christ the head of that relationship? Yeah, in a lot of cases, that's not true. That's not indicative of a lot of, especially the college relationships, is rather than building up and growing closer to God, that relationship brings people further away from God. So that's definitely a risk factor in the dating relationships in college. But I can attest to what you're saying. I mean, being a married man now for 27, 28 years,
family takes a lot of time, and then anybody that's married can, definitely attest to that. And I get what Paul is saying there. There's a definite flip side to that where he does state that, if you can do it, it's better to remain as I am, which, he was single. And I think because he had just this laser focus on Jesus Christ. So not that you can't do that as a married person, obviously you can, but it takes a lot of intentionality and sacrifice. You give time to Jesus, you're sacrificing that time to somebody or some other thing, right? Yeah. So less things on your plate to deal with as a single person. But all of that said, I think probably the sense of urgency that college students feel to be in a relationship with another person is kind of the thing where they're at, right? It's just like, I've got to be in a relationship because they maybe see their friends are in relationships and they're not, and it really, it's a downer for them, I think.
Yeah, and it's anytime I go around the world, I always ask, what is the views of marriage like? Anywhere I go. The South has this very exclusive view that you have to get married when you're young. We are demographically probably the only area of the continental United States that feels that need. When you go to like St. Louis, their average marriage time is in the 30s. When you go to California, it's 27, 28, 32, 34, 36. They have the view that I'll meet them when I get them. But, we look at it, like you said, that we have to get married, like it is a sense of urgency. But what if we could use that time while we're single to take what the Bible says, which gives us very good instruction on how to mold ourselves to be ready for that person. And you're never 100% ready when it comes to getting married before you're married. But what if you could grow into being, maturing yourself in the sight of Jesus Christ? So when she does come, you're able to understand why some situations as a couple are not the smartest situations to get into. Why sometimes you just have to say no. Why sometimes it's good to focus on one thing or another. The Bible talks about all of this. Yeah. And so we look at single as like, I'm going to be alone for forever. I can promise you by the young adults, even 27, 28, 32 years old, I've personally watched. Just because you're not married by the time you graduate college does not mean you'll never get married. Yeah. Sometimes God has his door closed to finding that one because he's telling us we need to grow first, or this is not the right time in your life for that person yet.
Yeah, great advice. All right, so I want to just shift a little bit and talk about, what have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned in the variety of roles that you've had. And just, you can pick all, just say the biggest lesson I learned as a firefighter was this, the biggest lesson I learned as a youth minister was this, or just pick one, it's up to you. That's a curveball. I know you probably didn't expect that one coming, but, you've had a lot of experiences. So, maybe some insight into lessons learned in the variety of roles that you've been in.
Take the good days that you have on whatever job you have and embed them into your memory, because when the challenging days come where everything just seems to be like falling apart around you, you can lean on those good times and it will help you get through that. Perseverance and patience are two words that come to my mind. Teamwork as a fireman. We have a rule. You always try to work whatever problem you have out with your fellow firemen, because they could be the one in the house that is pulling you out of it. Yeah. As a minister, I would say, and even CrossFitters, be patient with yourself. Give yourself some love. We live in a society where it's so easy to either knock ourselves down or look at our faults. But if we can look at our successes, it'll help us to be much more faithful in what we're doing, and it'll help us to grow as well, versus the mindset of just always looking down on, oh, this is what I could have done better. This is what I didn't do right. Well, let's talk about what you did do right. Even if it's a small thing, a small victory is a victory.
Yeah, good. All right, so I know this next topic, it's going to resonate, I think, with a lot of people because so many people in the United States struggle with their weight. You know,
Sure.
I've been overweight in my life, and in a very slow transitionary process of I've lost a significant amount of weight over the last couple of years, and hopefully will continue to get down to my optimal weight. So it's a constant thing. Something that you struggled with, and I think we're gonna show a picture of you, if that's okay,
Yeah.
of what you used to look like, and so that'll come up here in a minute for those that are watching the YouTube channel. Obviously, if you're listening in on the audio pieces that we have out there, you're not going to see what Brandon used to look like. But something happened in your life that triggered you to just be like, enough is enough. Do you mind sharing that piece of your story?
Not at all. I think it's interesting we are in a church environment because I was in preaching school. And when you're in preaching school, you don't have a lot of time to work a secular job. You don't have a lot of time to move around. You don't have a lot of dynamic time. You're literally sitting there all day studying. And I don't think this is a secret, but preachers don't really eat the healthiest.
I can attest to that.
In fact, looking back on the church meals I've eaten throughout the years, it's been about 80 to 85% carbs, and the rest is protein. We're not going to talk about the fats because those were super high. But I was hovering about 300 pounds in a 44 to 46-inch waist. I was in and out of doctor's offices, in and out of hospitals. And when I went to the hospital, the last time I did up in Elizabethton, the doctor literally came in with a nutritionist and said, if you don't do something right now, and I'm 29 or 30 years old at this time, they said, you're going to be dead by the time you're 45.
Oh, wow.
Because all I was eating was burgers, fries, lasagna, fried chicken, pizza, you name it. Things that taste really good if you don't eat healthy. And so I was with a friend, Dustin Humphreys, actually. He's a minister down the road.
Okay, yeah.
And we were riding together, and there was a gym in Johnson City called Lifestyles. And I looked down, it was the day after Thanksgiving, and I was like, I'm going to go sign up for a membership. And I did. And I was in there 3 days, three times a day, two times a day. I was in there multiple times a day, basically, almost every single day. And I was starting to feel a difference, but the difference maker for me was moving away from there down back to here, where it's a lot more health conscious, where it's a lot more, you want to get out and you want to do things outdoors. Mm-hmm. And then when you add on nutrition, that helped as well. I got into long distance running, and then eventually I got into CrossFit, because even though I could run 100 milers, I didn't feel strong. And CrossFit helped to get me stronger and so forth. And that was about 6 or 7 years ago was when all of that began.
So you got back from Spain, and I think you ate normal American food or something. You got sick because you had been eating so healthy in Spain, because they don't have all of the junk in their food, and they're much more highly regulated there. The government doesn't allow you to put certain stuff in the food in Spain, but here in America, it seems like it's put whatever you want in there.
And I don't think we have time to talk about all of that on this podcast, but I can tell you one thing that stands out. There was a McDonald's in Spain, in Madrid, actually, on Gran Via, which is where I was staying. I could see it outside my hotel window. I said, I'm going to try a burger here just to see what the difference was. I'd already tried a Coca-Cola. Tremendous difference. Mm-hmm. And I went in there, and I said, tell me about your food. And they said, oh, you're from America? I said, yeah. And they said, our food is not like your food. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they said, when McDonald's wanted to build in Spain, the Spanish government said, you can build and you can sell food here in Spain, but we have 100% control over the food. And so I asked him to expand, and he said, all of our beef comes from cows 7 miles down the road. Our McDonald's, particularly this one, opens at 7 because at 5 o'clock they have a crew that comes in every morning. They cut potatoes into French fries, fresh organic potatoes. Actually, they don't speak organic over there. We do. They don't know what that word means. I've asked them that. They don't have a clue what that means. They don't know what non-GMO means. They've never heard of preservatives. They've never heard of MSG. They've never heard of dyes. Things like mammograms, hair coloring, that's all banned over in Spain. Their COVID is almost 0% over there. The oncology floor is the lowest populated floor in the hospital of Madrid because they've learned to combat cancer with natural foods instead of things like chemo.
Yeah.
It's a different world.
Yeah.
But when I came back, I was sick for over a week.
Just because the foods that you were...
The garbage in this, and I don't want to say the U.S. is the U.S. is an amazing country. I love living here. But when I popped that first meal at Cheddar's in my mouth, I was sick. I was running temps. I was in the bathroom constantly. I had to go to the ER and get fluids because I was so dehydrated.
Oh, wow.
I was running a temp of 101.8. And, you know, it is I think that was a hard hit to me, who went through nutrition coach school, and has been living healthy, that I thought I was eating healthy until I went over there, and I came back over here and I ate what I thought I was eating pretty good, and then I got sick off of it.
So here's the thing, though, and I we're kind of like getting off a little bit, but, you know, here in America, it is expensive to eat healthy, and it is really cheap to eat really bad food. Mm-hmm. You know, and there's a lot of subsidies involved. You know, the government, you know, the stuff that they allow, you know, discounts on for, you know, folks that are on welfare or that stuff. It's all the really bad things that have all the preservatives and all of the you know, the things that are bad for our body. I'm assuming maybe that's not the case in Spain. I mean, it's or in Europe, really. It's not. You know, the bad stuff doesn't. The bad stuff is going to not be any cheaper than the good stuff, is I guess what I'm saying here in European countries. Correct or incorrect?
It's, as far as like bad stuff, the Doritos are the same color as the tortilla chips here. The bags do not have any bright coloring.
So really, I mean, the junk food, if we're going to label it, the junk food in Europe is technically, if you compare it to our junk food, is not really even junk food.
Right.
It's still better for you over there.
Their Coca-Cola over there, I drank one, has a thinner plastic because it doesn't have acid and chemicals in it to eat through the plastic.
It's probably got real sugar in it.
Water, pure cane sugar, real caramel for coloring, caffeine, and a little bit of salt. That's all that's in their Coca-Cola Classic over here. Over here, we have 87 ingredients in ours.
Yeah. Interesting. And I, you know, all this is, I think, tied into our health and nutrition and the way we feel, and, you know, obviously the way we feel and how we take care of our bodies. There's a spiritual connection there as well. All right, so I want to move on and talk about your time as a youth minister. What do you see that works in youth ministry versus what does not work in youth ministry?
When I started, I was young. I mean, I just started. And I developed this plan, this program, topics, this guide. It was going to be this every single week. We were not going to divert from it. That did not work. But what did work is I asked them, I want to know what you guys would like to talk about. And the overwhelming response for the group I got, at least, was they wanted to hear things that were applicable to them, things they could apply. And they wanted to hear about Jesus. So things that were facing them in their current phase in life, like, you know, finding your identity, the peer pressures, what to do when your friends are doing this. Will you abstain from that and feel alone, but know you did good service to God? Or will you give in because you don't want to be alone and you want to be part of the crowd? Another thing I found was, sometimes we just would have a class where they just ask questions and just talk about stuff. Sometimes I would sit back and let them kind of vent and talk about the struggles. And I noticed within that time they will get closer with those kind of topics, instead of the whole go off of the outline that I had designed and things like that. Like if they felt like they had a voice in that class and that they mattered, I noticed that they really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so you're allowing them to have some autonomy in the structure of how things, and that ties in, because the reason I wanted to ask you this as your time as a youth minister was, one of the things that I've talked about in some past podcasts. It's in my book that I talk about the 10 plus years as a campus minister. What I see when I interview college students is that the introduction of youth ministry into churches basically took away from the responsibility of parents having spiritual responsibility for their kids to make sure that they're getting trained at home, having devotionals and that kind of stuff. So once a person like you stepped into the church setting, and now the church is paying you, it's as if the parent said, "Oh, okay, well that alleviates our responsibility from this. It's your job. We pay you to give our kids the spiritual nourishment that they need, which is only happening a few times a week for an hour or so." Yeah. And so what happens as a result of that is they end up coming to graduating high school, coming to college with very shallow spiritual roots because they didn't get enough of it. So does any of that mirror or kind of reflect your time as a youth minister? And again, I'm broad strokes painting here, right? I know not all churches did that. They were much more inclined to have a directed conjoining, let's say, of parents and youth ministers working together and that kind of thing. What was your experience?
My experience is that I would go and go and go and go, and I would get burned out. And then once I got burned out, I would talk to the elders and I would say, I need a break from this for a minute at least. And at that point, the consensus was more along the lines of, what do we do? Brandon's not here for a couple of weeks. What do we do? And it was time I would take vacation and so forth like this. So I would naturally be away from this area. But no one really ever said anything to me about it, but I could just kind of tell that it was like, okay, Brandon, they're in your class. Have at it.
Yeah. And
it was almost like they looked at it as if it was kind of like a parent's night out kind of a thing, except they're 30 feet away. And so with that, I would say the youth minister is only one person.
Right.
And he only has, let's give it full time, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours a week. When you compare that to the amount of time and hours a week the parents have, and then what if the youth minister, something happens where, it's kind of like a strike on him, then what do the kids have to model themselves growing up after, aside from Christ, but a real person?
Yeah.
The parent has to be the primary role in that child's life. When you look at the statistics alone of parents not being present in that child's life, is it really so different when we look at the parents who dump the child on the youth minister compared to the ones who just abandon the kid and are just maybe there 3-4 times a year? That child has that natural need that the youth minister cannot fulfill, that can only be fulfilled by the parents. And those are things I've seen. I've seen a parent do a great job, and then I've seen what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I've seen, at least with those couple of cases, the end result. And they're very drastic.
They are different. And I think that just underscores the battle that we're facing here, and the fact that I think more churches need to hear this. I think church leaders need to hear the fact that, we've created a system within youth ministry that very much gives license to parents, and maybe, not open license, but just like kind of unspoken sort of understanding that, oh, hey, a part of our church budget, we pay this guy. So the responsibility, it's not necessarily there for the parents to. The expectation is, hey, the youth minister is supplemental. The parents are the primary teacher for all things spiritual. And man, if I could shout this from the rooftops, I would, because I see year after year the results of well-meaning churches who have youth ministers, but the parents have given control over it because they think that's what they're supposed to do. I'm not slamming parents. I mean, it's they've been conditioned to do that, to think, oh, this is, I don't really have the the place to talk to my kids about spiritual stuff because the youth minister is more knowledgeable than me and he's got the resources and yada, yada, yada. And what happens is when those kids graduate high school and come to college, what do you think that they do? They bolt, and they're gone. And they, 2/3 of them are gone. And many of those don't come back to the church, and we lose them. So I think what you just said, because you were in the trenches, you've done the job, you've seen it, and you basically are confirming what I've seen on the other side of that, which is we need to identify that as a major problem and maybe have churches sit down, leaderships with parents and say, hey, we've got to change the structure here of how we're doing things.
It's a huge problem. Like, if we have to look as parents, I'm not a parent, but put myself in their shoes from what I've seen. I've looked at them from the outside in. I think that's a blessing. Another blessing of being single is you can look from the outside in.
That's right.
And you can see all this stuff that parents don't see in the moment.
That's right.
If we were going to put ourselves in the shoes and we were going to mirror ourselves exactly as far as the parents' spiritual habits, especially when it comes to this, as kids go to college, when the parents, hey, you're multiple states away, multiple cities away, you're on your own, where, they have more freedom, whether they choose to attend service or not. What would the kids' pattern of service attendance look like, or worship attendance, however you prefer to call it? But it is a serious issue. I mean, these are souls on the line. These are real people with real hearts, and we have to take a serious stand, not against it, but we have to take a serious stand as far as like, how can we proactively, and for some congregations, how can we reactively fix a situation where not only does the youth minister have a little help, but he knows and feels like he has the help of the parents. And there is a difference between those two. But if the youth minister feels like he has the parents on his side, he's going to sprout so much more vibrantly. He's going to be more excited, because one of the biggest reasons youth ministers leave every 2 to 4 years, on average, 2 to 4 years, is because he feels like the parents are dumping too much and the church is dumping too much responsibility. And then when that youth minister does leave and the parents have dumped it on him and not taken part in that, then what is everyone going to do?
It's interesting you said that, because a lot of the interviews that I've had over the last decade with hundreds of college students, I'll say, tell me about your youth minister. And they say, well, I had several. In the 4 years of my high school, we went through 3 different youth ministers. And that's a telling sign right there. It tells you that something's broken, right? Yep. And I know personally of many youth ministers who feel like they're having a battle with the parents because they just can't win no matter what they do. It's either not enough or it's too much, or they're doing too many like fun game activities and not enough spiritual stuff, or there's too. I actually heard that there's too much scripture and not enough fun stuff, and so their kids don't want to attend. And that all leads to the fact that the parents feel entitled to even go to youth ministers and say to them, hey, you need to have more spiritual stuff with my kids going on. And I want to say, no, the youth minister should say, no, you as the parent ought to have more spiritual stuff going on with the kids.
Correct. Because
again, parents are the primary, and it should be where the church, the youth minister, is supplemental to whatever's going on at home with the stuff. And there's nothing going on at home, and you're now the primary source of that kid's spiritual edification. We got a broken system, and we're going to have a problem for the future church, because there's all the kids are walking away because they don't have any spiritual roots.
I will say this, I have been blessed at North Bradley. The young adults group, I have taught them since they were in elementary school, middle school, high school. When that congregation started, I was the young adults minister, still am. But I have watched them, and I can tell you the longevity of that consistency, the one of the biggest reasons I have even stuck around as long as I have is because I have never once not felt like the parents were on my side. Anytime I went up to them and say, hey, I need a break. Can you take over this class for me tonight? I just need to kind of recharge for a Wednesday night. the parents have always just stepped in. And they said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "These kids don't care. They just want to be taught something." I've had tremendous blessings at that congregation as far as that goes. And I would tell anybody listening, even if you just went up and just talked to the youth minister, just tried to find one thing out about him, what y'all might have in common, that would make his day right there, because he wouldn't feel like he loves what he does. But you can love what you do, but also feel like you have too much of it to bear. I mean, when you think of Moses, what happened with his arms? He was held up so to win the battle and so forth. What happens when they left him on his own to drop his arms? They would start losing.
You said, it is a blessing, and I think that needs to be noted, that when you run across congregations where you've got parents that are supportive, it makes all the difference. We just need more churches out there that understand that and get that, like the church you're involved with. So kudos to them, and I think they need to hear that. I think that they need to hear, hey, what you're doing is making a huge difference in our kids' lives. All right, so Brandon, what's on store for you going forward? Do you have any plans for the future?
Oh, man. That's probably the toughest question you've asked me so far. I want to continue doing ministry. I've got my CrossFit coach license now, so I'm going to grow in that. I'm going to Miami to judge a big competition in January. As far as like personal stuff, obviously keep reading and growing. But nothing really dynamic on the radar. Just, I guess it comes with being in your 30s. Is you have this stable set of things that you're going to keep doing in the future. But this little things like that kind of continue to simplify life a little bit and make it where life's a little bit easier but still enjoyable. And life's not always easy, but
right.
If you can decongest your schedule, it helps a little bit.
Gotcha. All right, so Brandon, thanks so much for being here today. As we wrap things up, just want to remind our audience, give us some feedback on these podcasts. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. Let us know if you've got a guest that you'd like for me to have on, and I will do everything I can to have them on the show. All right, final thoughts, Brandon. You got a scripture for us to close out the show?
I do. This is actually one of my favorites, and I think this is something that helps me to have patience with people. Have patience with people. It is Philippians chapter 2, starting at verse 1, but it says, "So if there is any encouragement in Christ, any comfort from love, any participation in the Spirit, any affection and sympathy, complete my joy by being of the same mind, having the same love, being in full accord and of one mind." Now, this is where I really like right here. "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility, counting others more significant than yourselves." To me, that says, don't forget about who you are in the process. He never told us to forget about who we are. He says, but think of others before yourself.
Yeah, great thoughts. Till our next podcast of The Lion, the Way, and the War, love one another, be kind to one another, and remember that the Creator of the universe loves you so much that He gave up His only Son for you. Until our next podcast, have a blessed day.